Allez, 9h35,
So,
toujours en direct
35
pour cette
minutes past
cinquième édition
9, we're still live
des
for the
matinales de la
occasion of the
distribution,
fifth edition of the
évidemment
fund
en direct
distribution breakfast.
et en digital cette
So we're
année.
live
Après cette première
and
table ronde, on enchaîne avec
digital
une seconde
on
qui
this
peut être
occasion.
aussi
So,
passionnante,
second
notamment
round
sur
table this
les
morning,
produits maintenant
as
avec les cadres
fascinating as the
réglementaires. Quels
first
sont les
one. So,
produits, le comportement des
let's
produits
move
d'un
towards
point de vue
the
de
products after
performance
talking
ou
about the
ensuite durable.
regulatory aspects
On va commencer avec
and products
Hortense.
behavior.
Hortense
Let's
Bioy
start
est
with
avec nous.
Hortense.
On
Hortense
a hâte de voir votre
Bioy,
Bonjour.
you're
Voilà,
with
merci d'être là.
us. Yes, thank you very much for
Voilà, comment ça va?
joining us.
Ça va très bien.
How's
Vous êtes
life
chez
treating you? Good,
Morningstar.
good, good, good.
Bon, très bien. Directeur Sustainable Research.
So you're
donc en français, de la
director of
recherche
sustainable
responsable
research
chez Morningstar. Comment se
at
comportent les fonds durables
Morningstar.
en termes
So
de
tell us about the
performance, de
behavior,
collecte, et est-ce qu'il y a des
performance
différences,
and
justement?
collections
Ben,
of
on
sustainable
renseigne évidemment
funds
sur les
and
fonds durables
differences
et
between
les
sustainable
fonds qui ne le
funds
sont pas, les fonds
and
traditionnels.
those
Un petit topo déjà de la
traditional
situation.
funds. And tell
Oui,
us a
tout
few
à
words
fait.
by way of
Très
setting
bien.
the scene.
Oui, bien sûr. Alors, vous voyez
So,
sur votre écran.
scene
c'est ça.
setting, as you can see on
Ces
your
2 dernières années, on a
screen,
vu
I hope.
augmentation
What about 2
fulgurante
years?
du
We've
nombre
seen
de
a
fonds durables.
a boom
En moins
in
de 2 ans,
sustainable
le milliard de
funds.
fonds durables en
Within
Europe
the
a
last 2 years, the
s'agrandit de
world
40%
of sustainable
pour
funds has
regrouper
grown
maintenant près de
by
2900.
over
Rien que sur
40%,
les 9 premiers mois de l'année, on a
2,900
vu
such
près de
funds.
340
At
fonds
the start of
supplémentaires
the
arriver
year,
sur le
well,
marché. Quant à la
another
collecte de ces fonds,
340
elle
funds
aussi
have come into the
battu
market,
des
new
records,
funds,
135
breaking
milliards
records
d'euros
here,
depuis le début de l'année, ce qui
135
est 3
billion
fois
euros
plus
since the start
élevé
of the year,
tout de
3
même
times
que la collecte des fonds
higher than the collection
traditionnels.
of traditional
Et
funds.
ceci est bien entendu
So,
dû
and
à
this is
l'engouement
obviously
grandissant des investisseurs pour un
linked
investissement
to
responsable et durable.
the
Et ce, malgré la
investors
crise
moving
du Covid, ou plutôt
increasingly
devrais-je dire
to
grâce
sustainable
à la
funds,
crise du
with a
Covid,
growing
parce que c'est vrai
interest in
que
these funds.
que
And
l'épidémie
despite
a
the COVID
sensibilisé
crisis, the
davantage les
epidemic
investisseurs au
might have
risque ESG et
sensitized
surtout au
and
raised
raised
climat.
awareness
Les investisseurs
from the part of
comprennent et
investors to
acceptent
climate
davantage
and
aujourd'hui
ESG
qu'il faut
risks.
protéger l'environnement.
Investors more and more
C'est d'ailleurs
understand
aussi
that
pour cela que cette année, on
environment
voit un nombre
is
record de
to
nouveaux
be
fonds se focalisant sur
protected.
la
So many
thématique
funds have now
environnementale.
refocused on the
Un quart des
environmental
nouveaux fonds durables lancés cette année
area
ont un thème
and have
climat,
an
bas
environmental
carbone
focused
ou autre
climate, low
lié à
carbon, or other
l'environnement.
related to the
Les fonds
environment
durables ont également
are the
beaucoup
characteristics of
la
many,
cote
many
cette
of
année
these
parce qu'ils
funds.
ont fait leurs preuves en
And
matière de
these funds
performance.
have delivered
En
as
moyenne,
well,
les fonds
performance-wise,
durables ont
and
moins
on average,
résisté que
they've
les fonds traditionnels à la
been more
panique
resilient
que l'on a
to
vue sur les
traditional
marchés au
funds with
premier
regards to
trimestre, au
the
moment
panic that we
d'éclatement de la
saw
crise du
when
Covid.
the COVID-19
Alors
crisis
là, les
started
explications, bien entendu, sont
earlier this
multiples
year.
et là
So
encore
many, many reasons
pas moins
related to
claires,
that, and
mais
maybe
peut-être qu'en
need.
partie,
So I would
cette
say
meilleure
that
performance
part,
était
at
due au
least
fait que les
part
fonds
of it, is
durables ont
that
tendance à être
performance
moins
sustainable funds tend
exposés
to be
au
less
secteur de
exposed
l'énergie qui a
to the
beaucoup
energy
souffert
sector,
lors
which
de
has been
la
deeply
chute
impacted
du pétrole au premier
when
trimestre.
the oil
Et ces
prices
fonds-là sont
dropped
aussi plus exposés à
during
des secteurs
Q1, and they're
qui
more
ont
exposed to
jusqu'ici ont mieux
sectors
performé, comme
that
la technologie
better delivered better
et
performance,
le
such as
healthcare.
technology and
Autre
healthcare.
explication,
Other
les entreprises
explanations to that
qui ont
is that
tendance à bien
businesses
gérer
that
leurs
have
risques
tended
ESG
to manage
ont
their
aussi
ESG
tendance à
risk
avoir des
well
cours de bourse
tend to
moins
have
volatiles
less
et qui
volatile
résistent donc mieux en
stock
temps
market
de crise
fluctuations,
sur
and
les
therefore they're
marchés.
better
Et donc,
resistant
pour
when it
conclure
comes
sur ce
to
point de la performance, cette année tout
evolutions on the
particulièrement,
market.
les fonds durables ont prouvé
So sustainable
qu'investir
funds,
de
as a
manière
conclusion,
responsable et
found
durable
that
n'implique
investing
pas de
in a
renoncer à une
sustainable
partie de la performance financière.
way doesn't mean renouncing to your financial performance. So now, over to the CEO of Credit Investment Management, and so, and so when it comes to sustainable investments, when performance is there, is delivered, is it there for longer spans of time on technology, on energy? So what is your take on that? Hello. And well, I fully agree with what Hortense has just stated. And when we come to the starting point and the etymology of extra financial investment is what relates to what goes beyond the forecast period from the part of the, as delivered by the financial analyst. So we're looking at other factors of risks that can weigh upon the decisions of the company and maybe beyond purely financial criteria. And this de facto improves the performance of the analysis, the clarity of the analysis when it comes to more sensitive decisions. And the point of attention, as Hortense stated, and what we've seen is the significance of tech value and healthcare products, sustainable products, so climate and low carbon products. So obviously these products are less polluting than cyclical industrial values, and so like servers of Amazon pollute so in their server farms with their cooling systems, but you pollute less than covering a distance of 500 kilometers of flying or taking or boarding an aircraft. So, and flying. So, obviously, these values and are identified in sustainable funds. And the risk is that if there's a sectorial turnover is, well, this will impact the performance of sustainable funds. And if there's a turnaround in the economy, so by increasing analysis, mitigating risk, you can have better performance. And if there's a dramatic change on the market, you might end up in a somewhat changing performance. But I fully agree with Hortense's statement. Indeed, when investing, when investing in performance, you have less volatility and better performance, better resilience. There we are. So, Karim Karmoun, so tell us about your take on these matters. You have sustainable funds and the true force. How do we, have more clarity between good products and not so good products? So, what is your view on these matters? Now, we have to have a holistic vision on the matter. As Hortense stated and as Guillaume stated, sustainability has always been our company, in our view, a driver of value creations and performance. And we've seen this over the past 3 years. We've seen a kind of a tree structure in terms of performance. We've been highlighting a variety of examples there. When we talk about topics, areas, and so is ESG a theme in itself? Is ESG an area in itself? And because when it comes to investing, is performance only related, solely related to performance? And sometimes we split between the E, S, and the G, so 3 different themes. And as Guillaume stated very clearly, this is a whole set, this is a whole approach. And as we stated, this is a whole approach that we need to have and develop. In the past few years, thematic funds have offered really good or even excellent performance, outperforming many products such as water funds, energy, clean energy funds, or well-being in the workplace. So we need to identify whether these performances are purely linked to the theme in itself, i.e. this is as a driving force, as pulling the performance of these products, boosting these products, because as Hortense stressed and pointed out, is this, what it is with these funds, or is it a movement from part of the whole society in itself, moving towards these SRI approach. So these are, I think these funds are along the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. From 2018, we were one of the first companies to move into that area, and funds have been performing really well. This is into the approach you might be developing, and performance can be really good and shows that SRI doesn't destroy performance but creates performance. And you, as a trailblazer, and you didn't come across this just about a year ago. This is more a management strategy. And doing SRI, it's not about ticking boxes, right? No, that's not. We've been doing this for a long time now. We've got somewhat robust experience. And I think this is about being a sustainable player, meeting a number of needs, generational needs. And today and tomorrow, this is about rising up to a number of challenges, giving a purpose to everything that we do. It's about rising, and these economic and social challenges are extremely important. And this is about managing these challenges and pushing further. Let's take the example of COVID-19, which is an example. We're right in the midst of quite a unique context. You've seen the social and economic and social CSR, corporate social responsibility, and the management caring for one's employees and ensure that their skills development internally are there. And this is a whole part of the whole approach, and making sure that their needs are met. So, and this is about CSR is about value creation, and needs to be built in, and climate change and globalization. And this is a whole organization that allows us to partner with a number of key initiatives. And Robeco has joined in recent initiatives, and so 26 of us in September 2020. We launched Finance for Biodiversity Pledge. This is a kind of call to action when 26 players convene, invites companies to be way more transparent in terms of what they do, how they do it, and ESG matters from ESG perspectives, inviting players to be way more reactive and taking concrete actions. At Robeco, we've launched a unique organization as a result. This is about investing European expertise. So we created a team, an expertise center, with bringing together the best expertise in our company to instill and disseminate this expertise within the organization, and that ESG does not solely apply to one product or way of doing things or managing. It is really part of. It impacts all the way, all the chain, all the way to the final customer. What about for Crédit Mutuel? What is the Crédit Mutuel take here, Guillaume? Are they ahead of the game at Robeco, or is it part of your practices internally? Or a question on the impact of COVID and the social dimension of ESG? So, several dimensions to the questions you've just been asking. The fact of deploying a ESG approach is something that has been actively put in place amongst the various players, Bank of Luxembourg Investment, Crédit Mutuel, and the fund managers and the fund distributors and the fund managers. So beyond what has been rolled out in terms of management, this is about a corporate approach. At group level, with commitment at Crédit Mutuel has been making pledges have been developed. So it is difficult to be credible on CSR themes or topics if you're not leading, you're not a role model, and you don't apply these to yourselves. So I fully agree with Karim on that front. Now, and we can see mainstream funds, there's CSR funds and thematic funds. An important point that needs to be highlighted is that when you propose to investors, notably to retail clients, a thematic fund, there's a narrative to it. And when you propose a fund that is going to be deployed on a class of assets such as or shares in Europe, it's more difficult to tell a narrative. To talk about stock exchange, economy, yield, performance, equities. That needs to be in the long term quite similar to the ROC as part of economic functions and so on. You've lost your clients there because clients are not economists, experts, stock exchange experts, you're in a thematic fund, you're telling a narrative. And as an example, the Paris Agreement and the necessity to cut CO2 emissions by 40% between now and the end of the next decade. So the kind of demonstrating that the values that you've selected are part of this approach, fall within this approach, and they're really ready to follow you and to invest over a long period of time and accept periods of volatility and underperformance because this is a theme they believe in. Something that is very virtuous and very positive indeed. Thank you very much, Guillaume. Hortense Bureau, anything else you want to add on these performance and behaviors in terms of what you've seen at Morningstar, the true or false ESGs, the funds where you have box to ticks and the real funds in contrast to thematic funds? Well, it is important to clearly understand there's a whole array of funds, and they don't have the same role to play in a portfolio. And mainstream and kind of sustainable funds can be used as a substitute to traditional funds and thematic funds. Meanwhile, well, it depends on how the theme or the portfolio moves, from the market or not, and to what extent. They don't have the same role to play between generalist funds and thematic funds. Now, when it comes to the issue of how investors, and especially retail investors, can have clarity in all that. Now, we talked about labels earlier, and how many funds, label funds in Europe there are. At Morningstar, we're talking 2,900 sustainable funds, but label funds, we're talking about over 1,200. And so the label, the guiding label is the French label, the ISR label in France with 500 label funds, and followed by 418 funds for the Belgian labels and then the horse flag. And then the horse flag. So there's a race to develop labels, and which labels are going to be more certified than others. Hopefully this will not be guided by a movement downwards, but by a movement upwards, hopefully. And as a business working on these classification, identification, key issues, this is a challenging task because we're basing analysis on documents that use quite at times a vague language. And so it is difficult as well for investors to have clarity there at times. Something I wanted to touch on. You have 30 seconds, Hortense. This is about the redeployment of traditional funds, the reconversion of traditional funds, because what we've seen, depending on the, according to data, over 20% of sustainable funds in Europe were in the past traditional funds. So they've been transformed, they've changed, they've been converted in their mandates, and they have adopted a low CO2 strategy or best-in-class strategy. Some turned into thematic funds. So these might give the analysis of performance quite difficult because there was no track record. And so this is a trend that we're looking at very closely. Very interesting indeed, because we can clearly see that SRI, ESG, this wave is now pervasive and just invading the market there. Thank you very much. And now performance is there between ESG funds with traditional funds and even amongst ESG funds. So Guillaume for Crédit Mutuel, asset manager, what do you reckon of this double competition, which is about the topic indeed? I don't know if you can hear me. Yes, I'd say that this is the topic of the previous round table. It's about the label in Europe that gives, which makes it difficult for the final investors to have clarity, for the institutional investors to sort it out, to have clarity between all of these products. So this is about having a homogeneous taxonomy in Europe. Plus, there might be competition between ESG funds, traditional funds, and between the ESG funds within a single corporate or within under the scale of the market. So clearly, there is, well, that label, notably in Europe, a label in France such as the SRI label, and SURE is regarded as sheltering a fund for which methodology of this has been a strict methodology applied. There are other funds are not strict, but not as known to the French as retail. People wanting to invest, and maybe funds very engaged or very rigorous in their approach, which might not be necessarily labeled as SRI or actively managing, might not be part of the SRI approach simply because there's no data. As much as the SRI data can be very readily accessible on European stocks, maybe a bit more complicated to obtain on US markets or more exotic markets, but you can still be engaged in very nice stories, values delivering strong performance, and highly respectful from the part of, in terms of very, and lots of environmental markets. It's not about putting one value against another. We have to really be very serious about analysis based on these phenomena. So what about you? And as ESG, traditional funds, sustainable funds, I'm going to speak to funds on the market because the issue is now we've decided to SRI was kind of a mainstream now. There's no competition internally, I'd say, but I think this is a healthy market because labels will allow us to give structure to all this, to give backbone to all of this. And clients are more and more demanding when it comes to distribution, to fund distribution through this label. These are kind of a stamp, a quality stamp, that notably for life assurance players such as the PACLO, which we touched on earlier. This is about having a French label, and this will become a must-have. Competition is good, and this allows it to be on the leading edge and to look out for excellence and strive for excellence. We need to pay attention to all these cases around. This can have negative effects. There's the greenwashing, the impact washing, and there is a bit kind of underlying to your questions. I think we need to be very, very careful, and this is a whole approach and a market structure. And there are more European approaches, the green grid that we need to categorize according to 3 specific categories: green, light, or dark green. As early as 2021. All these approaches are good, they're healthy, and they're allowed to give structure to this fund distribution of our products. So once again, under 1 minute now, Morningstar representativeness of ESG funds in the main asset classes. What is it actually in terms of figures at Morningstar? Well, we do have these data, but what do I say by way of an introduction? These sustainable funds have delivered superior driving pulling force, the impact is strongly increased in the past few years across the main classes of assets. So the action sustainable funds account for nearly 13% of the total number of action funds in Europe, against 8% 2 years ago. In bonds, market share of these funds stands at 6%, as opposed to 3.9% 2 years ago. And in asset funds, their market share now reaches nearly 10% against 6.4% from 2 years ago. So this clearly shows that the market of sustainable funds is changing very rapidly. It is becoming more competitive, as we've mentioned, with the boom in passive funds. Let's not forget about these ones because they're gaining grounds on active management and on asset management, and this from ASGL, ETF, and ESG. We have over 320 of those in Europe, and this year we are now about to break a new record in terms of the number of these funds. So thank you very much to you, Hortense, and for Crédit Mutuel Investment Manager, Guillaume, and Akamo. So there's one question on labels, but we push for time, so we're going to be moving on to the next roundtable discussion. We talked about regulatory framework. We talked about the products. Now let's talk about the interest from part investors for these sustainable products. It is 10 a.m. We're live for these 5th edition of the fund distribution. So short